Hey there, lucky listeners. It's another episode of The Partial Historians. Join us as we talk about the history of ancient Rome, tracing it from the founding of the city all the way into the distant, distant future. I am Dr. Radnest.
And I am your elegant co-host, Dr. Greenfield.
I feel like that was a comment on my demeanour in some way.
I usually just introduce myself in a really low-key way, so I was just trying to, do something different.
Again, there's subtext.
Failed.
There's subtext there somewhere. But it is a delight to see you again because you are, of course, refined, elegant, breathtaking.
Like yourself. A whirlwind.
Like a coffee.
A gorgeous whirlwind.
We've been having some sound issues, guys, sorry.
Yeah, we're trying to compose ourselves.
Yeah.
We've just spent the last maybe 2 hours trying to figure out how we would even record these episodes, having left the comforts of our houses.
Indeed, yes. We're in a library.
Having retreated to a library of all places. Can you imagine us surrounded by books?
Such is our dedication that we would leave the confines of our apartments and go and find a recording space elsewhere.
Okay, so if the acoustics don't sound quite right,
yes.
We're not in our comfort zone right
Bear
now.
with us, yes. Do you know what? I feel like this is perhaps a good mood to start the podcast in because ancient Rome itself, at this point in time, is not resting easy, is it, Dr. G?
It is not in its comfort zone right now.
No.
Look, somebody just got killed.
Yeah, and perhaps actually, either way you look at it, it's a violent end. Spurius Cassius, that troublesome rogue, he's either been beaten to death with rods, perhaps with the involvement of his father, or thrown from the Tarpeian Rock.
Neither of which is a good sign, guys.
No. The last one is not as fun as Warner Brothers cartoons would have you believe.
In any case, so we're picking up now our narrative
Yes.
From the point of death of Spurius Cassius.
Yep.
However he did die, whether it's being thrown from the rock or being hit to death by his own father,
Yep.
on the orders
dead.
of others, he is quite dead.
But are the issues
Oh,
that
but the
brought him
issues,
to this end, are they over? Are they dead?
They
No.
are certainly not. And boy, are we just getting started with the conflict between the plebeians and the patricians.
Damn straight. So tell me, what's Dionysius got to tell us these days? Because usually it's a whole lot more than Livy.
So many things. So, to place us back in the context of where we are,
Yeah.
we're in around about 485 or 483 BCE. And
No 484? What's happening with you even?
there's a 2-year discrepancy where people agree on the dates or not agree. Anyway, so I give you both, so
Yes.
you can choose the one you prefer.
Indeed.
We're in the consulship of Quintus, Fabius, Vibulanus, and Servius Cornelius, Maluginensis.
Jesus.
Yeah, well, these are the guys who were consuls while Spurius Cassius was being put to death.
Yes,
but some other stuff now happens.
Yeah.
Cassius being out of the way,
Indeed.
as it were.
Yeah.
They now move on to not carrying out the decrees of the Senate.
Ooh.
Yeah, they decide to not go about allotting the land, the public land.
Right. Yeah. Because this is essentially what I dare say that the whole Cassius issue, as you probably would have guessed if you listened to our previous episode, it wasn't just about the land. It was also about who's more popular, how they're getting that popularity, etc.
It's never just about the land,
No,
is
it was
it?
really about the power. But the land was the excuse. And there definitely were feelings about the land as well, but I think that was partly an excuse with Cassius personally. But the land is still an issue.
Yeah, and I think, both sides feel quite strongly about the land, obviously for different reasons. And
yeah, so we're talking about that age-old divide now, that classic trope that we've been going on and on about, the divide between the patricians and the plebeians as they battle it out over who's going to have the land.
Yes, well, and the patricians are obviously in the best position because they have most of the land.
Yeah.
So they're quite excited.
And they're wealthy, powerful,
Yeah, and if there's anything that we know that an aristocracy enjoys, it's retaining power for themselves.
Exactly.
Heaven forfend that the plebeians should stand up and say...
And reminding themselves that they are pretty special because the plebeians are suffering over in the corner there.
Guys, we got the land and we're special.
Yeah, exactly.
The plebeians are like, I'd really just like to have some land, please.
Because then I could get, food.
Yeah, that'd be nice.
Yeah.
But it's becoming an increasing issue. So Fabius and Cornelius, these consuls, have decided that it's not their duty to carry out this degree of reallotment of the public land.
Yeah.
It's actually their position to appoint the decimvirs, the group of 10, who was going to set up the boundaries and stuff like this.
Interesting.
And to see what should be distributed and whom it should be distributed to.
And this is the first time we've seen like this whole idea of a special 10 men who are going to be set up to carry out.
They're like, our job is to appoint some bureaucrats who will look further into this. Yeah, essentially. And they continue to have meetings because there's obviously turbulence, not just in the city, but also in the broader area. Rome doesn't have many friends right now.
Yeah. Yeah. When does it ever?
And there seems to be this really prevalent understanding from the patrician perspective that more foreign wars are a good way to divert the plebeians from this issue of land realignment.
Classic strategy of distraction, and it's proved very successful in the last, let's be honest.
Yeah, except of course the poor don't come forward to enlist.
Power play, I like it.
They were like, why would we?
Yeah.
And the consuls are sort of not able to make people comply in this sense. And
they are but 2 men.
And
so who's the enemy that they're thinking of sending them against?
They're interested mostly in the Volscii, but also the Etruscans at this point as well.
I'm wondering, I see it's always a bit hard sometimes to make our accounts fit together. They're not peas in a pod all the time. My account does mention a particular campaign against the Volscians and the Aequians, actually. So I'm not sure if it's the same. Is it the same?
There's some of that coming up. I mean, and the trouble, I think, for our source perspective is that you and I are reading things where Dionysius of Halicarnassus is going into lots and lots of detail.
Yes.
And Livy at the moment is fairly sparse.
He
and
is
actually,
the Cliff Notes of his own country's history.
The summary of the summary.
Yeah, that's right.
And unfortunately, for the next sort of 20 pages, I have various incursions against the Volscii, the Aequians, the Etruscans, and they're all, it's one after the other successively, this ongoing back and forward, and I'm not sure whether my example coming up is going to be in any way representative of the one that you have.
The one example that I'm
one that you
going, I know something.
Guys, they're not happy.
Okay, well, I guess all I can contribute at this point in time in that case is that Livy notes that the plebeian anger, which had been aroused against Cassius, didn't last long.
The consuls apparently start to peddle this idea that perhaps Appius Claudius would have to be made dictator to overcome the difficulty of this situation if the plebeians are unwilling to enlist themselves and volunteer.
Yeah, well, I think as far as I can tell, Livy is recording that the plebeians quickly realise once Cassius is dead, as they tend to do. They tend to work themselves up into a frenzy, and then it very quickly peters out. And they realise, ooh, that probably wasn't the smartest move to make. And they start going after this whole agrarian law again, as in, we really do want that, even though we don't want Cassius. So what say you, patricians? And the patricians are like,
how about no ski?
Yeah.
Yes. So, we end up in this situation where the patricians are like, how about some wars? And the plebeians really don't want to because they're not happy with you right now because you're not looking after us.
Yes.
And they're like, we will send the guy that hates you most and put him in as dictator. How about that? And everyone's like, okay, I'm enlisting. Yeah. I'm signing up for the army. If I do it one more time, hopefully we'll get it through.
I wonder if Appius Claudius ever got tired of playing the bad cop.
I don't think so. I think he really relished it. And so we get to this point where the armies have been enrolled.
Yep.
Everybody's signed up. Woo, we've got all the numbers.
Yep.
The consuls take command and lead out against the foes.
Woohoo!
Woo! So Servius Cornelius goes to invade the territory of Veii.
Okay.
So Etruscan area.
Yep.
And, goes and collects all the booty and stuff.
Yep.
And so forth and so on. And, it's becoming... I could go into more detail, but I feel like, at this point, we just need to...
The Romans won, they get some booty.
They come to a truce, etc., etc. There's some booty, there's some prisoner exchange.
Yeah.
The usual.
Yes.
Quintus Fabius, on the other hand, marches into the country of the Aequians.
Yep.
So they're in sort of the northwest.
Yep.
Or the northeast, I think it might be, actually. So heading over into the Apennines and then also sort of swings around to the Volscians towards the south.
Okay.
As well. And the Volscians are like, sure. And they just sort of retreat back a little bit and they let their lands be plundered.
Always a good strategy with the Romans as well, because then the Romans get sick of it and they get bored quickly and they go home again.
yeah. But then they see the size of the Roman force, and even though Rome's managed to enroll themselves in army, maybe it's not quite as large as usual.
Okay, they're starting to feel a bit more confident in themselves.
And they're like,
his isn't actually as big as I thought it was going to be.
They look at the Romans plundering their land, they're like, you know what, that army is smaller than last year's army.
I reckon we can take them on.
Yeah, and apparently they conceive of a contempt for the Romans.
Well.
Oh, yes.
Oh, well, that is daring.
And they set out from their territory at Antium to go and rescue their lands. And they're like, this will be great. We'll just surprise the Romans. They're not going to be ready for that one.
I love it.
And they also decide that they're going to be quite, they're going to try and be more sophisticated about this.
Okay.
So they wait until they encounter the Roman army.
And then they put on the high heels and whip out the clutch purse. Nice.
And then, I wish. Yeah. But instead, what they do is they decide to retreat once they're seen.
Okay.
Careful.
Being very coy.
Yeah, let's retreat back.
Let me guess. They throw a careful glance over their shoulder, flip their hair.
And they're like, Romans, I see you.
And we haven't seen each other for such a long time, and oh my, how you've changed.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Most of them go back to the city, and they're like, so see you. But a small group of them retreat. I know, it sounds like ridiculousness, but I mean, this is what Dionysius of Halicarnassus is telling me.
This is classic, yeah.
A small group of them go up to the top of the hill. And they remain there for the following night. They're like, let's chill here.
Chill on the hill.
Yeah. And so obviously the Romans are encouraged to like surround that hill entirely, so there's no way down.
Yep.
And the consul's like, yes, let's surround them, it'll be great. And the Volscians are compelled by hunger after a few days.
Yeah.
So clearly haven't
brought this is the Volscians, not the Aequians.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Gotcha. They're compelled by hunger to surrender. And
I was going to lead to something more exciting.
I know, but it's the Volscians just sort of playing around with some coy tactics, which I think are going to become important later on.
Okay.
Yeah. And there's this interesting, just this one line offhand comment that the consul, after ordering the quaestors to sell the booty he had found, brought the money back to the city. And I was like, oh, we have real quaestors now. Like, quaestors who do stuff with money now.
Right, okay.
Dionysius of Halicarnassus has never mentioned these properly before, really.
Because the last time we were talking about quaestors, I think we actually talked about them last time, but we were discussing how they had a slightly different role because in Spurius Cassius's trial of sorts,
they're like specially appointed
to investigate, was it?
Yeah. Quaestor Paracidii. Who have this jurisdiction over particular cases of killing. They need to look into. Which is a very different thing from what quaestors usually do, which is basically glorified accountants.
Yeah. So we're seeing more return to that idea of quaestor as treasurer-ish.
Yeah, person. Like just slip it in there.
Okay, that makes sense because in Livy I do have this mention that when the Romans set out against the Volscii and the Aequii, they triumph over them remarkably quickly in Livy's account, of course. There's no details whatsoever. The patricians take all of the booty and deposit it in the treasury.
That is interesting.
Yeah, and this is what really ticks off the plebeians. They are furious that all of the booty has gone to the treasury, and that
because then they're never going to see it cut, really.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly as you say. That that the consul had. Yeah, basically he sells off all the goods and then puts the money in the treasury. Like, and that's what gets them really worked up after slightly settling down. During the whole campaign. So I wonder if this is the same thing we're talking about.
Yeah.
I don't have any specific mention of the quaestors. But
I mean, it's just talked about as the money is brought back to the city, which is interesting.
Yeah.
And I wonder if this is a method that the patricians might be deploying so they don't have to distribute it to the allies.
Well, the fact that they seem to go through this process of selling it, then like they sell the booty, sell it, then
they take the money.
Yes, and keep the money for themselves in the treasury.
Interesting.
Sly dealings, patricians.
What do you think they're up to?
So you reckon that if it was in the form, if it was some other form, that they'd have to give a cut to their allies, and therefore it might be like, I don't know, is this like some sort of I
wonder. I mean, by selling the booty, well, one, who are they selling it to?
Well, exactly.
Who's buying the booty?
This is my question, because I'm like, you're pretty much at war all the time with the people around you, or they're your allies. So who are you selling to?
Yeah, unless they're selling the booty to the allies, and then keeping the money.
Yeah, or maybe I wonder if they're selling it like to each other, as in. Yeah, I got some cows here. You need some cows, Bill? Yeah, I do.
But
thanks, Tom.
Even that's very weird.
It is. This is a very weird situation.
Okay, we've got a mystery on our hands, listeners.
Keep a lookout for the treasury.
Yeah, I'm going to keep thinking about this one because I'm...
Follow the money.
Yeah, it's bad. Maybe we'll find some more evidence later on.
Yeah.
In brackets, probably not.
Yeah.
Certainly not in the things that I've read so far.
But it is interesting to note that the quest is going back to, well, not back to, but they're going to that role again of the money guys.
Yeah, well, these are different quaestors.
Yeah. They're not the quaestors patriciani.
No. Yeah. But yeah, so we've got this sort of formal mention of quaestors doing things. So I was like, ooh, it's exciting. There's a cursus honorum. So anyway, this leads me to the end of this year, pretty much.
Okay, yeah.
And the patricians realize that, it's time for the election of the magistracies again.
Yep.
We need some new consuls.
Yep.
And obviously the plebeians have been pretty annoyed.
Yeah.
The whole Spurius Cassius thing is still it happened this year. Everybody's still annoyed.
Even though I feel like pointing out to them, you had something to do with that, you idiot.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry. The plebeians sometimes, as they're represented in the patrician sources, annoy me. And I think that's probably deliberate, but yeah.
Yeah, look,
Keep them calm. Keep them cool. Sorry,
keep cool. Keep cool. Yeah. So the patricians want to guard against fresh disturbances.
Fair enough.
From the plebeians.
I would too.
They don't want any more bribes. They don't want any more sort of allotments of land being proposed.
Yes.
That
no
kind
one
of
say
thing.
the word agrarian.
Yeah,
I don't want to hear the word agrarian.
Don't mention
or whatever
the land.
it is in Latin. I don't want to hear that.
And they don't want some guy who's a demagogue, a good public speaker who can rattle up the crowd.
No.
To have the prestige of the consulship.
They definitely do not.
And so they're like, we need to have somebody in the position who at least appears to have some democratic sympathies.
But is at heart.
One
of us. Yeah.
One of us. Yeah. So they have a look around and they're like, who could be really good for this?
Let me guess. A different member of the Fabian family.
Yes.
Excellent.
Even better.
Yeah. Well, let me see if I can preempt you again.
Yeah, do it.
Was he maybe involved in the whole Spurius Cassius affair?
He may have been.
I'm on a roll!
So,
yeah.
Fabius.
Yes.
Brother of Quintus, current consul.
Yes.
Is sort of set up by the patricians as a go-to.
Yes.
I mean, he's democratic in nature. The plebeians have been swayed by him in the past.
Yep.
Presumably, he's a good catch.
Yeah, because he was one of these quaestor patriciani types.
He was
when Spurius Cassius was being investigated. Wasn't
yes, yeah. So he has stepped up big time.
Yes, he has.
Look at this guy. And then we have a guy called Lucius Aemilius.
Now that is another
out
name.
Out of nowhere.
Yeah, this is another name that's going to become uber familiar. The Aemilii, another clan to watch. for those of you keeping track at home.
Yeah, this becomes a really important gens.
Very much, yes.
But this is like the first time that we've sort of seen one of these.
Look, it's going to have to happen eventually that some of these new people sneak in, because otherwise we've got what? Publicola, Fabii, Cornelii. Who are we talking about here?
So Lucius Aemilius, we're not really sure like where he comes from necessarily.
No.
He is given a bit of an ancestry, but again, out of nowhere.
Yeah.
He's related to the Mamercus group. But Mamercus is just like this weird ancient Roman name, which everybody's like, meh.
Do you know what it sounds like? It sounds murky. Sorry.
Oh, no. You went there.
I kill myself.
I'm glad you're here.
Okay.
And so these two put themselves forward for office.
Yep.
The plebeians are like not happy. They get together on the Campus Martius in the Comitia, as is their wont. It is the Comitia. The Comitia Centuriata. And they leave because they're like, this is not good.
The plebeians leave.
Yeah, the plebeians leave. They're just like, no. And they just kind of walk off. They know their vote's not really going to count anyway.
Yeah, and just a refresher for listeners at home, as much as I know you're all super keen on everything, it has been a while since we talked about the Comitia Centuriata. I believe the last time we had an in-depth discussion, Dr. G, was way back in the monarchy.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Allow me to take you back to the time of Servius Tullius, the fifth king of Rome. Yeah. He was a pretty good guy, and he's renowned for helping to set up this Comitia Centuriata, which listeners might recall was meant to seem equal, but really wasn't.
That's the important part. The appearance of equality.
Yeah, everyone goes there to vote as part of their century, but Servius had set it up in such a way that every century gets a vote, but by the time the poorer people get to vote, they're all in the same century, because it's all about how much money you have, how much tax you can contribute, how much you can afford to pay for fancy shiny armor and horses and whatnot. And basically the wealthier people formed particular centuries, and by the time you get down to, say, the 4th century, then they pretty much know which way the vote's going to go, and that means that the wealthy people have voted first, and the people further down the scale with their slingshots and what have you probably don't need to vote because they already know which way the majority is going.
Yeah, so you have these situations where it's like each century represents like the same amount of monetary and property wealth.
Exactly.
Essentially. So this means that you've got really small centuries in the beginning voting
who are super
like
wealthy.
The super wealthy who are like, we're just one century. And it's like 5 guys over there. What? And then as it goes down, obviously the poorest of the poor are all like in the last century.
Yeah, so there's heaps of people
in that one, and they're all very unsatisfied.
Standing room only.
They very rarely get to have a persuading vote because normally, as soon as you hit the halfway point, you only need one more vote.
Yeah, exactly.
And everybody starts, like, all of your client-patron relationships and all of your loyalties and stuff start to kick in, and it's really important that you're seen to be voting the right way.
Yes.
So there's not a lot of
and each century only has the one vote. Everyone in the century gets to have a say.
Everybody has a vote within that century, but whatever the majority is within that century becomes the single vote.
You know, I gotta tell you, it's not the simplest system I've ever heard
Politics, my friends, is complicated. But the important thing to know here is that the poorest of the poor in the plebeians rarely ever get a say.
No, exactly.
They are invited to turn up, and when they walk away because they're irritated, it means things are not going the way that they would
and this
like.
is the whole thing. It's that show of equality. They rocked up and gone, you know what, screw you guys, I'm going home.
So they get to be last, and they get to be angry.
What a life.
So, I mean, this is good times. Now we hit the consulship of what is around about 484 or 482. Lucius Aemilianus and Kaiser Fabius.
Nice. What a pairing. I'm loving all these familiar elite gens having all the power.
And Dionysius gives us this sense that this is a time of war throughout the Mediterranean. There's a lot of conflict going on, civil and foreign.
I still have mention in Livy, this very brief mention, of course, that in their consulship, they've still got this problem of the plebs are just at the end of their rope. Clearly, they don't really know what to do, but everyone knows they're angry, and therefore, solution is war.
Yeah,
but not with each other, like with those guys over there, or maybe those guys over there, or maybe those guys over there.
It feels like the Romans have really got themselves stuck into a particular mode of being.
They're like, such a rut.
It is. Yeah, we are in big rut territory because we have things like the wisest leaders are aware that you don't want to stir up the embers at home.
Yeah.
What you want to do is conduct foreign wars.
Yeah.
To ultimately distract people from a civil conflict.
Yeah, but I feel like, it's, as we've seen, it's such a freaking Band-Aid because...
Well, I wonder if this might be a sign of like a really broader issue perhaps in the whole Mediterranean area. And like, are we experiencing like 4 or 5 years of like poor crops and things like this? Because if this is happening throughout the Mediterranean, then maybe we've got some bigger issues going on where everybody's like, well, it's better if we can fight somebody else because we're all going to be fighting at home otherwise.
That's true. Yeah, I mean, this is exactly it. We have heard mentioned that if you look at certain sites and if you look at, say Rome, for example, and Italy in general, it does seem that there is a real downturn in, artistic production, histories with good detail. But yeah, all the sort of fringe, all the things that aren't really, strictly speaking, necessary to basic survival seem to take a bit of a downturn. It seems to be a bit of a black hole. And we can't be sure, of course, as historians, whether that's just because, well, unfortunately, nothing happened to survive from that time, or whether there's just not that as much out there and people are struggling.
Yeah, and I think perhaps there's a combination of the two.
Yeah.
I mean, there seems to be really clear struggles. But
Yes.
if you're also rallying up all of the people to distract them
Yeah.
from the fact that they don't have anything to eat, for instance, and they
Yeah.
don't have any land,
Yeah.
there's some bigger issues going on as well.
Yeah, definitely.
You don't have enough people to farm, but do you really have enough people for an army? Running an army is expensive in terms of resources.
This is what I mean about it being so frustrating to see this rut, because I get what they're doing, and don't get me wrong, full respect. It's worked before. But how long can you really keep that up if the people who would normally be doing the farming and whatnot are constantly away fighting and they're just getting angrier and unhappier, and you're having to bully them more and more to get them to do this ridiculous charade? Like,
Yeah, and I think we're going to start to see it fall apart a little bit.
Yeah.
Just you wait.
I'm speaking like I don't know. I just realised I'm really in the moment. I'm really committing to
like, just you wait.
Yeah.
Coming up next. So the Volscians.
Yeah.
Turning for a moment. The Romans are like, foreign wars, that'll be a good idea.
Yeah.
We've got some new consuls, let's do it.
Yep.
And the Volscians themselves are having a similar sort of situation. And they're like...
I bet they are.
well, they're like, we can... let's make war upon the Romans.
Yeah.
For reals. Again. Another year,
Not
another war against the
pretend
Romans.
foam swords.
None of that prancing about where we coyly show ourselves and then retreat back to our city.
Behind our fans.
Yeah.
If I put it to the left, it
So,
means...
yeah. They decide to split their army into two. And they send one against the allies, the Hernutians and the Latins. And they keep the other half of their force at home as a defensive force.
Okay.
A ploy we rarely see in this period of history.
No.
Interesting.
It is, yeah.
The Romans are like, okay, well, we're going to have to go and help our allies, obviously.
Good.
And we also need to lay waste to the Volscians.
Is there anything to lay waste to is my question, but whatever. Proceed.
The important thing here is
Yes.
which consul goes with which army.
True. Are we going to have one staying at home or one going one direction, one going another direction?
Well, so we're going to have Fabius.
Yeah.
He is going to head over to the Latin and Hernutian territory.
Right,
So he's going to be like,
help the allies. Yeah.
help the allies,
Yeah.
sending the support. Lucius Aemilius, on the other hand, is heading towards Antium to the Volscii.
Taking the war to them. I see.
Yeah.
Okay, yep.
And apparently, and Dionysius of Halicarnassus sort of misses a moment here, or decides it's not worthwhile, or maybe his own sources are lacking, but he just says that Lucius Aemilianus encourages the troops at length. We don't get a speech.
Oh, wow.
I know.
Oh, my God.
And then he orders the trumpets.
I feel a little faint.
I know. It's all over in like one sentence. Rousing the troops, trumpets, let's do this. And I'm like, whoa.
I feel like Livy, you and I and Dionysius, we're all getting a little over it.
Maybe. And I'm like, he's just like, this is not worthwhile. Or maybe this is a sign that this is a character who we don't really need to care about.
Could be. Yes, it could be.
I wonder. But in any case, we don't get a speech. They just get straight into it.
Yep.
And the important thing from Dionysius's perspective is that the Volscii and the Romans, at this point in their histories, both have very similar fighting styles.
Well, that would make sense. They are
Surprise!
Next door neighbours.
They've been fighting each other for generations at this point. Yeah. It feels like it never ends. So neither of them has a real military advantage.
Okay.
Yes.
Because the Romans are awesome. I think we're forgetting that.
Oh, just you wait.
Yeah.
So the Volscians start up this tactic again.
Yeah.
Where they are like coming out and like, I'm going to retire a little bit.
I hope they dress nicely.
I raise my petticoat.
That's right. Yeah.
And I inch backwards.
Ankle.
Yeah.
Is that a gilded sandal, I see?
That's an interesting spear you have. I've got one just like it in my tent. Come closer, young Roman. But they keep their order and rank, and the Romans are kind of like, okay, well, if you're going to slowly withdraw, I guess we're going to slowly advance, as you do. And then they kind of get a little bit carried away. Yeah, so the Volscians get closer to their camp and they sort of start to run a bit faster.
Right, yeah.
And the Romans start to, chase up a little bit faster as well.
Yeah.
And this means that the back guard of the Roman army reaches where there are some enemies who have been, dead, killed, whatever. Yeah, there's been some. And they start to plunder because they're like, you know what? We might as well,
Because you're going to say they're White Walkers and they've actually risen up.
No. They're like, you know what? We can see what's happening, and those guys are retreating a bit. We're moving forward a bit. It's time to do some plunder.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense.
The Volscians, however, have done a bit of a about face at this point and decided to stand their ground while the back guard of the Roman army is distracted. And they've also left the gates of their camp open a bit. Mm-hmm. And so now a whole bunch of people run out of the camp.
I see. Okay. Yeah. Very sneaky Volscians. Yes.
And perhaps a bit undisciplined on the Romans' part to start doing the plunder of the bodies and stuff before you really kill the guys. But the Volscians seem to be moving so slowly that nobody really thinks that they're actually doing up to anything. They're like, well, they're retreating back to their camp. I suppose it's time to collect the bodies.
So like there's a moral lesson in here somewhere.
Yes. Here many brave Romans lost their lives.
Well, I never. I feel like it's actually been a while since we've got any indication that the Romans aren't pretty much kicking ass whenever they choose.
Yeah, and this turns into a real defeat.
Really?
Yes.
Wow, I can't believe.
So people are busy despoiling the dead and plundering and stuff, and now they get killed by the Volscii.
It's so not... I could be in the wrong year, but sorry, I'm just in shock because Livy does not really give me any indication that there's any sort of defeat or anything happening. Sorry, I'm just like in shock.
I think this is to me this is a really interesting part of the narrative because it's so out of keeping with the way that the Romans have been represented.
Yes.
By Dionysius up until this point.
Well, and they just seem to be getting stronger and stronger. I mean, look, obviously, don't get me wrong. I get that Livy has a vested interest in making sure that the Romans look good at all times. But, he has recorded he's recorded defeats before. And he will again. But
there will be more defeats.
There will be more.
Just you wait.
Yeah. But okay, anyway, sorry.
Yeah, so we have this sort of moment where I'm like, this was to me a really interesting read because all of a sudden it's almost as if the Roman morale has just dropped right by the wayside.
Yeah, definitely.
The discipline has gone. They're essentially saved by the onset of a thunderstorm.
Weather. Wow.
Wow. A thick mist arises.
You're at a low point when weather has to save you.
And so Aemilius eventually breaks camp, leads his army away.
Yeah.
To try and get away from the enemy while under the cover of this thunderstorm and the thick mist.
Yeah.
And then he encamps near a town called Longula.
Okay.
Which is just north of Antium. So they've retreated towards Rome.
Yeah.
But they're still in Volscian territory. And he sort of sits there and, fixes up the wounded and stuff. and speaks words of encouragement to them. And I was like, dude.
Yeah, what other words?
There are no words.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, no, we're not given a speech for that one either.
Whoa.
Yeah. And the Volscians are kind of like, oh, wow, that's quite interesting, isn't it? They retire back to Antium. They're like, that'll be good for us.
Yeah. Score 1, finally.
And they sing songs of triumph.
Nah.
Yeah.
Do we have the songs?
No.
Dionysius written the
Sadly
musical scores.
No. I wish. They offer sacrifices in their temples.
Dionysius, you are slacking off.
Yeah. And then they decide that they really should pursue the Romans to Longula.
Right.
And deal with that as well.
Okay.
So this is kind of where things go a little bit wrong. They head towards the Romans and they're like, okay. And they get there and the Roman army seems to still be suffering from this sort of demoralized state.
Yeah.
And eventually it comes down to the Triarii to come out and save the Roman army. And I was like, the Triarii?
I was going to say, have we mentioned these guys before?
Never.
No, please.
But the Triarii are pretty important.
Yeah.
They're the oldest and wealthiest men in the legions.
Ooh.
They're like the veterans.
Nice.
So these are the ones who have worked their way up the ranks of the infantry, essentially.
Yeah.
And they've made money being in the army. And
so these aren't people who were necessarily born into wealth?
Look, they're going to be plebeians.
Yeah. Okay.
But they've made something of themselves within the army structure.
Interesting.
Yeah, so they can afford good quality equipment, and they're called the Triarii because their place is usually as the third in the infantry line.
Okay, yeah.
And it's usually the case that they don't have to fight.
Okay, yeah.
They're often given a defensive position, so they're often the ones left guarding the camp.
Yeah.
While the young boys go out and kill people.
Yeah. Just in case you're unaware of military tactics, and if you are, shame on you. The Romans at this stage tend to have this system which requires, like sort of send forth fresh troops in the front line, and then after they fought for a little while, they'll go back and the next line will come up. But yeah, hopefully you don't get all the way through all of your troops.
Yeah, the idea is that you don't, because obviously you start off with all of your projectile weaponry first.
Yes.
So slings, arrows, spears, javelins.
Yeah.
That's supposed to take out a good lot of people.
All your Olympic equipment.
The discus features heavily. If only, but maybe.
The rhythmic gymnast. Flying through the air.
It's the balls, guys.
That's right.
Watch out for the ribbon.
Yeah.
So you have all of your projectile weaponry.
Yes.
You send in infantry forces, but you usually try to support them with the cavalry.
Yeah.
So the cavalry is doing the bulk of trying to run people down for you, because obviously your infantry are your most exposed.
Yes.
And least able to defend themselves on some level. So you kind of want to protect them where you can. But the Triarii are the last line of that infantry.
Yeah.
And usually to be a Triarii, not only have you done well in your career in the military, so you've lived.
Yeah. Boy, have you lived.
Boy, have you lived.
Yeah.
The things I've seen, boy. And you've lived in the army. You've survived every battle you've been in so far.
Yeah.
You're a veteran. You've earned money. You've had a lot of booty and plunder. You know what you're doing, and you're basically going to sit back and just... you're a professional.
Yeah.
If it comes at you, it comes at you.
Do you feel like this is one of the things that, obviously it's early days, so this is hardly the norm type situation or anything, but do you think this is one of the things that is inherently appealing about Rome? The fact that there are these little avenues that will grow more and more, I think, for people to climb ranks. It's always going to be rare, but there's still those avenues that you can make something of yourself.
Oh, yeah. So, there is room for glory for any Roman citizen.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
There are various paths to virtus.
Yeah. Perhaps this is why they're so keen in taking their togas off and showing everyone their scars.
Indeed. And even though what we're dealing with in our written sources is a really top-down history that's coming from an elite perspective, writing about elite issues, and often giving primacy to the elite position.
Yes.
Within that, you really have to read between the lines to feel any sympathy for the plebeians.
Yes, definitely.
you do get stories like this where it's like, oh, the Triarii, they've been there all along.
Yeah.
You know.
Quietly. Yeah.
Quietly doing their work, quietly doing the business. You don't know what side they're politically on.
No.
But these are the guys who, when trouble really happens in a battle, are the go-to guys.
Yeah. Sorry, that was a bit of a tangent, but I just wanted to know more about these people, these mysterious, shady people.
So they're the oldest soldiers. This usually means they're in their 30s.
Well...
Yeah.
If that isn't a kick in the teeth, I don't know what is.
So that should tell you something.
Yeah.
Like, these men are on the brink of death, everybody. Have you seen a 30-year-old man in ancient Rome? Yeah. Goodness me.
Well, especially one who's spent most of his life in the army. I can only imagine. Just one long scar.
But, you know, it's that sense of the craftiness of being a veteran fighter where it's like, look, we'll send the young ones out first because they're very keen.
Yeah.
But these ones are probably more stoic, more bitter, perhaps. And maybe the ones who have the most to gain from something like land reallotment as well.
True, yeah. And booty.
Yeah. So the Volscii retreat to a nearby
Standard
plain.
move now,
Yeah, they retreat, yes. And they apparently have a good chance to defeat the Romans. But unfortunately, support arrives for the Roman troops.
Right, yeah.
This is where things get good in terms of like the broader patrician narrative.
Yeah.
So Fabius, who's been hanging out with the allies and supporting them, has learnt about the issue that Aemilius is facing, and he's like, okay, I'm going to send some troops, you know, send them over, but I'm not going to go myself.
Yeah.
Because it turns out that the auspices are bad for me to come along as well.
Yeah.
And he's like, I've offered some sacrifices and I've consulted the auspices, but the gods oppose me coming. So I'm going to sit here with the allies.
Isn't that just convenient?
And I'm going to send some troops from my army because things are looking fine over here at the moment.
I feel like there are auspices that tell me that, you know what, my classes don't need me to teach them. I don't have to go to work on Monday.
I see there's some danger over there.
Yeah.
The auspices say no.
No. So unfortunate, because I would have loved to have been in the heart of things, guys.
Yeah, look, I wish I could have made it. But you'll be fine.
Is there any hint of derision in Dionysius, or is this all coming from me?
It sounds like very serious,
yeah.
But it also sounds to me very convenient.
Yeah.
So he sends his best cohorts.
Okay.
So that's quite generous of him.
Yeah.
But it is interesting that he doesn't make the decision to go with his bulk of forces himself.
Yeah.
He splits off a group of them and stays back. That's also something a
I'm
bit different from what we've seen as well.
I'm watching it.
Yeah, so Aemilius becomes emboldened by the arrival of reinforcements.
Yeah.
They approach the Volscii and they fall upon the enemy. And I've highlighted things like swords, stones, javelins, spears.
It's a barrage.
It's all happening, guys. The Volscians are hurled back from the hill, lose many of their number, and they turn flight and barely get away safely to their own camp.
And I think this is where I come in, with Livy's classic line of, with little loss to themselves, overthrew in battle the Volscians.
Yeah.
Nice one, Livy. Nice one.
Oof. Yeah, there's not much going on there, is there?
Although, is it the same one? Maybe not. Maybe it's another conflict with the Volscians. I don't even know.
Tough. I mean, the result of all of this for Lucius Aemilianus is that he feels very strenuously this idea that he has been defeated. This is not a victory that he can claim for himself.
Okay.
So
what a humble man.
Yeah. So the time for electing the new magistrates arrives.
Yeah.
And this is an interesting little way in which Dionysius is prefacing the struggle in this narrative.
Yes.
It's not just a new year, new consuls. The time to elect magistrates has arrived. Like, it's this whole new part of, like, we need to discuss what's going on for the next, 3 months. It's going to get a bit hairy. He stays in his camp. He doesn't want to go back to the city. But Fabius goes back to Rome.
Okay.
He leaves his officers in the camp and he's like, well, you know what? I can head into town. I've got some politicking to do.
Yeah. Gonna hit the election trail.
Yeah. And he gets into this situation where the people are assembled for the election, because he can call that sort of assembly.
Yeah.
And he declines to propose for the voting those among the ex-consuls on whom the populace wish the consulship to be bestowed.
Wait, sorry. Can you
I know.
Again? Yeah.
He declined to propose for the voting those amongst the ex-consuls, on whom the populace wish the consulship to be bestowed.
Okay.
So they have an assembly where the people get to express their wish.
Sure.
It's not something where they vote.
Yeah.
But they say, these are the people that we'd like to have.
This is how I'm feeling.
Yeah.
I hope you take it on board.
Yeah. This is what I'm into right now. This is the mood of the crowd.
Yeah. Like someone with, sort of weird directional hair, ripped jeans, acid wash.
I'm looking for a man who's scarred, particularly on his chest area.
Yeah, not on the back, of course. Only on the front.
Yeah, I want them where I can see them.
Yeah.
And he basically responds to that assembly and says,
Yeah.
I understand what you're asking of me.
But I'm not going to do it?
But I'm not interested in any of those candidates.
Wow. Okay.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I feel like there's so much interesting stuff here.
Because we are getting, we've kind of mentioned this in the last few episodes, we are getting more of a back catalogue of previous consuls now that we're getting further into it. So there actually is the chance that someone would be very much so elected and have served in the position before.
Yeah. So, people can have a preference. I can see the plebeians being like, not Appius Claudius.
Yeah,
for instance.
Yeah, of course, yeah. That goes
but we do like this other guy.
I don't really see what he's got to gain here. This is the thing. I mean, apart from if he's got someone else in mind, that's particular that hasn't been consul before.
It seems a weird thing to say.
Yeah.
And I'm not quite sure what to make of it.
It just seems needlessly aggressive. Antagonistic, I suppose, is what I'm looking for. Yeah.
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 It seems that from his perspective, this is partly about the fact that these people that the populace wish, and they're not named, are people that haven't volunteered, haven't put themselves forward themselves.
Okay.
So the people are like, we want these people. And he's like, those people aren't even up for the vote, guys.
Right, yeah.
Which may be part of it.
Okay, yeah.
But he also calls upon the centuries, so we're in this new comitia, to take some votes in favour of who they would seek in office.
Right.
And since we're in the comitia and it's the century, it's going to be coming from the top down.
Of course, yeah.
So then we get the selection of candidates from the Senate, and who they want. And they turn out to be people who are not very acceptable to the plebeians. No surprises there.
Hardline patricians all the way.
After having a year where they're just like, let's put somebody in which we think they're going to like to try and avoid them.
Yeah,
the patricians have really gone back to, we're just
well,
going to
they've had that, yeah.
We gave them that, and now we're just going to put somebody else in that we like.
It's not like they were voting in, like, Mr. People Man of the Year. Like, they were still patricians.
Yeah. I mean, they're all patricians at this point. Yeah, you don't have any choice.
No.
Really. But yeah, so we've got this conflict that seems to be playing out, but in a really sort of weird way that we haven't seen before, at least not in a way that Dionysius has ever expressed before.
Yeah.
And it might be at this point where it might be a good point to end this episode, actually, before we delve into this next...
The election's facing us.
Yeah, we're at the cusp of an election. Who will be the consul for the next year?
Good question indeed. Well, in that case, Dr. G, I'm going to say it's time for the partial pick.
Ooh,
indeed.
The partial pick.
Yeah.
We should have a sound effect for that.
I know. I think we should next time. That's an eagle, in case you can't tell. Because we're rating them out of 10 golden eagles for each category. So, Dr. G, what's our first category to consider?
Ooh. I don't even know if I have a pen where I can add things up anymore.
That's all right. I'll do it mentally.
Oh,
I can do it
good.
mentally. Yeah.
Okay. The first category out of 10 eagles, military clout.
Well, for the first time in a long time, the Romans actually have a defeat on the board.
Oh, they sucked.
Yeah. But then again, they do seemingly have some success as well. It's not all bad.
Yeah, but it feels like this is more of a blow to morale.
True.
More than other defeats.
So are you feeling like 4? Or are you feeling like, ooh? Or is it even?
Yeah, look, let's put it on the evens. On the balance. Yeah.
Okay, so 5?
Yeah, 5.
All right. Congratulations, Rome. You have 5 golden eagles so far. Next up, we've got diplomacy.
Oh, shocking diplomacy.
Let's face it, this is never the Roman strong suit, really.
Giving them a complete 0 there.
Really?
Oh, well, I suppose they supported their allies.
Yeah, I was going to say. I feel like they deserve
that
like at least
for like
a 1.
3 or something.
A 3, okay. Well, you're just bouncing all over the place. I can't even keep up with you. All right, so a 3. All right.
I feel like I'm being pretty generous today.
Yeah, no, I think that's good. All right. Then what have we got?
Expansion.
Nice. Except that there is no expansion.
No, they don't expand at all.
No.
That's a 0.
That's a hard 0.
That's a tough one.
Virtus.
Wow. I mean, I guess it depends on who we're talking about. I feel like with the triarii in there and the paths to virtus that are open to people.
I feel like there's got to be something on the board.
Yeah, look, it's certainly not happening in politics, but maybe knowing more about what's happening inside the structure of the army is quite worthwhile here.
And this, again, like the allies thing, I mean, I know it's like the basic level of decency to go and support your allies, but...
Oh, yeah, I mean, yes. Even if you don't go yourself, I suppose sending your best cohorts is a nice idea.
Well, yeah. I feel like there's going to be something for that. So what do you reckon? Like a 3? Too much?
Oh, no, that sounds fine to me.
Fine?
Yeah,
okay.
yeah,
Right,
I concur.
All right, good. Finally.
The citizen score.
Oh.
How nice is it to be a citizen in Rome right now?
Not good.
No, not particularly.
No.
Yeah.
I actually feel like it's almost a 0. Am I being too harsh?
No, I mean, the Senate just keeps knocking back the land allotment and just sending out bureaucrats to complicate the process. I mean, it's hardly useful to be a citizen right now if you're starving or you need land.
No, or you don't want to go to war.
You're not interested. I mean, they find ways to make you interested, don't they?
Yeah, exactly. So a 0?
A 0.
That means we've got only 11 golden eagles on the board today.
Out of a possible 50 golden eagles.
Yeesh, Rome, you're killing me.
That is a fail big time.
I think there's only been one episode so far where we've made it over the 25.
The 25.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Yeah, look, we haven't hit the glory days yet.
Well, exactly. You never know what's going to happen next time, listeners, so please tune in next time to another episode of The Partial Historians.
We will see you there.